Hello, welcome to the Weekly Jam. Brad here. Really great to see you. It's term 4 and I've lost track of the weeks. So we must be into the term. I feel like I want to say, I'm going to look. I feel like it's week 2. I worked out this week, interestingly, that across the 2 universities I work at, and the fact that we do school terms and something else, that I'm actually in week 22 of term. I worked out you have to add them all up, and that equals welcome to week 22 in my world. Holy smokes, which explains a lot. I think a big show today, and mostly love. If you have something you want to talk about, Pete and I have been talking a lot lately, and I've just been thinking about you. I think about you. And been thinking we've had lots of chatter in our gig-based learning community of practice, and I thought last week we were going to bring a lot of that chatter across to YouTube and address it live in the jam, and we might do that today, but also we might just see what comes up in the comments and address that as well. And yes, speaking of comments, stand by, just checking a couple. And yeah, you might have noticed that I haven't introduced Pete yet. I wasn't paying that much attention. Pete's doing what Pete does. It's one of my classic phrases. He called me a moment ago and he's doing an emergency gig. This is gig-based learning after all, right? And so I think he's playing the saxophone with the hot pots somewhere as we speak or something. All I knew was he wasn't going to be here, and then I kind of tuned out. So wherever you are, Pete, I hope you're doing what you do. And don't worry, I got this. Interestingly, though, when I do that, there's a space for you, just saying. Speaking of, so it's third episode of the term. Next week is next week. But then the last week, week 5, is the GBL Christmas party. And we'd love you to come, any gig-based learning community of practice members who would like to actually be part of the YouTube component of the Weekly Jam, running as co-hosts. You'll recall that we have many segments. For example, we have GBL News, if you'd like to share some news. Remember, sometimes, or often, I guess, our news is quite narcissistic. So if you have some narcissistic news where it can be all about you, you're very welcome to come share that. And anything that's happening in your school, in your practice, whatever the heck, if you would like to share that, you could be part of the news. I don't know, maybe you've got something to talk about for the Robot Roundup, anything that, any AI you've been using that's been working. What else? No, not that one. We don't care about that. Oh, yeah. Do you have any hot links from around the World Wide Web? You could share those. Or you could just present with some FAQs. That would all be great. And you might like to just be a part of Bradagogy behind the scenes as well. So that's not next week. I wanted to give you a couple of weeks of warning. Not next week, but the week after. Getting in early. I'm not sure it's December, but the GBL Christmas party. And love to get some different faces on the screen. That would be really cool. So welcome to the jam, and let's get into it. I want to get you behind the scenes. I'll press a few buttons and let's see what happens, shall we? That's Pete. That's me. That's Pete. So I think we've established that the buttons do what they're supposed to do. They're not exactly the buttons I was hoping for, but that's okay. So have a look at this. I'll just leave Pete there for today. Pete, that's where you would have been. And for anybody for the Christmas party. So here we are. Bradygogy, behind the scenes. I think that is one button that I have some confidence in. Bradygogy behind the scenes. And this is the one for this week. And how's your world? OMG. Looking at the world through clouds of ideas. Whoa, how's your world? And so I studied the bass guitar with Jeremy Allsop at the Victorian College of the Arts, and he used to come in and drape himself over a piano bench and just release his back. That's not a bad lesson. And then he was a really cool dude. He'd been to New York. And so one morning, as I say here in the blog, he comes in and says, how's your world? He'd been to New York. How's your world? And like I said here, so see here, how's your world? And I didn't know I had a world. I was from regional New South Wales. I just thought there was one world. Wait a minute, I thought I have a world. And so then the other day I was sliding into philosophy and reading Ian Hacking's introduction to the 50th anniversary edition of Thomas Kuhn's seminal work, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. And check this quote out. And of course, there are many worlds. Whoa, go on. I live in a different world from that of opera divas or the great rappers. Clearly, there is a lot of room for confusion if one starts talking about different worlds. All sorts of things may be meant. Holy smokes, I thought Jeremy has a world, I have a world, Ian Hacking has a world, opera divas have a world, and great rappers have a world. And that does seem to leave a lot of room for confusion. So all of these worlds and confusion seem to stem from stealthy assumptions, beliefs, and ideas we've been talking about. And this brings me to Canadian academic Brent Davis. We might even click some hyperlinks today. We'll see. So, OMG, where are we here? Opera divas have a world, which is different from Ian Hacking. Whoa. And then there are the great rappers. So I didn't write about this in the blog. It was too much. But I think we're behind the scenes here. What about the not so great rappers? The also ran rappers and the opera choristers? I'd imagine they live in worlds as well, which would be different. So I don't even know how many worlds there are, but it turns out this is really cool. Brent Davis does. So Brent Davis has been working away for about at least 20 years. He's written four editions of a book called Engaging Minds. And when I started my PhD studies, I came across a book that he wrote early on in the early 2000s about genealogies, inventions of teaching, it was called. And he looked at how the words we use to describe teaching have changed over the years. He called it a genealogy, inventions of teaching. And then he folded lots, so it's on the GBL book list. Stop the clock. It's on the bookshelf. So let's go to the GBL website. The GBL website is here. 3, 2, 1. Here's a website I didn't prepare earlier. Bookshelf up the top. And these are the books we dig. And scrolling down. Boy, I talked about a lot of these in class today at the Conservatoire. It's around here somewhere. Yes. Inventions of Teaching a Genealogy by Brent Davis. And then this one I'm going to blog about over the next little while. So this book, Inventions of Teaching, blew my mind, changed everything. And my gosh, he just introduces lots and lots of concepts. The assumptions and the way that teaching has come to be, how we come to think about teaching over the last little while. I'll become less scatty as we go along. And then Engaging Minds is in its 4th edition, like I've said a few times. And what does this mean? Well, it means that there's just lots of versions of his thinking that are really difficult to track down, but I think I've tracked them down. So this is an idea that we'll stick with for a long time, I think. We're starting to talk, over the last little while, we've talked about assumptions and how they're stealthy and how they come together and how we act out of our assumptions, right? So this next step is this idea that Davis is onto from Kelly in 2010. And Kelly maintains that ideas never stand alone. They come woven, this is beautiful, woven in a web of auxiliary ideas, consequential notions, supporting concepts, foundational assumptions, side effects, and logical consequences, and get this, a cascade of subsequent possibilities. This is beautiful. Ideas fly in flocks. To hold one idea in mind means to hold a cloud of them. Kelly, 2010. So I've been, and Davis does this as well. He hasn't really, because Kelly has opened a can of worms there. He's got a couple of metaphors going on. Well, he's got probably a few metaphors, but the two metaphors that are really interesting, I think, are fly in flocks, ideas flying in flocks, and then to hold one idea in mind means to hold a cloud of them. So it's a little bit problematic. Are there flocks of ideas or are there clouds of ideas? And I don't think, and Davis seems to use those interchangeably, and I wasn't quite sure because I quite love both of those. Aren't they beautiful? Ideas flying in flocks and such. So for the blog post, I decided to go with clouds of ideas. So I think we'll probably come back to that. So these ideas that we have, which we might have come in stealthily, start to form clouds, right? Whoa, start to form clouds. And then these clouds come together. And then rather than just acting out of one assumption, we get these clouds of ideas. And then before you know it, you're living in a different world from the opera divas or the great rappers. And there's lots of confusions. So clouds of ideas. Let's move on. These clouds of ideas come together. Oh yeah, this is pretty amazing. Clouds of ideas and assumptions come together to form an invisible backdrop for how an individual sees the world or their worldview. So now we're starting to talk about not just one assumption or one idea, but a cloud of ideas that form an invisible backdrop. And we see the world through these clouds of ideas. And that is our worldview. So let's break down. There's 3 things to get on top of here. Worldviews, paradigms, and frames. John W. Creswell uses the term worldview, but says it's often used synonymously, and it is, with paradigm, a term Kuhn resurrected from, you guessed it, the Greeks. It's a Greek word, when he reintroduced it to the world in The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. But check this out. Aristotle used paradigm like we use exemplar, a very best and most instructive example. Unfortunately, the use is a bit like Unfortunately, the use of paradigm is a bit like pedagogy, and look what happened. This is that Google search I like to do. Paradigm has taken off. So Aristotle says it back here. We don't have room on the screen, and then nobody says it for a while. Kuhn publishes the book, and then kapow. And these are the different pronunciations of it, which is pretty funny. So a paradigm can be like an exemplar, can also be used interchangeably with worldview, and we'll get to this other word, frame. So there's this guru of qualitative research called Lincoln Guber, Ergon Guber, a guru, Ergon Guba, R.I.P., I believe, not with us. Sorry if you are, but I'm pretty sure. And so, Guba and Creswell, a couple of gurus, a paradigm is a basic set of generalizations, beliefs, and values. So a set, generalizations, beliefs, and values that guide the action of a community of specialists. That's us. Or the wider profession of music teachers, which sits within, of course, the wider profession of teaching, which sits in the wider society. Okay, so we have then, as a profession, generalizations, beliefs, and values that guide our actions, but guide the actions of the community. Okay, this is Davis and Francis's from this new version of Engaging Minds. Paradigm refers both to a system of thinking and an image or a metaphor that can serve as a symbol for the system. So a worldview, in their terms, is a frame, an extensive and complex web of meaning, which we look through. Hang on. Which we look through to see the world. And it's made up of these clouds of ideas, you see. They use frame to refer to coherent and resilient systems of thinking. Resilient means that it's not easy to budge them. Check this out. Kuhn believed that paradigm changes in science, like the Copernican turn in astronomy, swap the sun for the Earth at the center, tend to operate sequentially as more powerful images and their associated sensibilities displace entrenched ones, causing scientists to see the world of their research engagement differently. And so, after a time, this is really interesting. Insofar as their only recourse to that world is through what they see and do, we may want to say that after a revolution, scientists are, get this, responding to a different world. So that moment when the community, remember up here, the community of specialists finally agreed, yes, we don't need to burn anybody anymore. We've come to a broad agreement that the Earth rotates around the sun, not the other way around. And so we have the Copernican turn. Hooray. So that wasn't easily won. That took a really long time, of course. And so I've come up with this idea to help us start to understand why it's difficult to make changes and why it's difficult to talk to each other at times. It certainly has been in my experience. So have a look at this. Whereas scientists seem to eventually move to a new world, so when the sun, they decide, like I said, the sun is at the center of the universe, paradigm change in education seems to result in a tension-soaked, quite proud of this, Marvel-like education multi-world, TM. As new clouds of ideas and assumptions emerge and begin to guide the action of a community of specialists, the old world carries on. Does this ring any bells? In the recently released 4th edition of Engaging Minds, Davis and Francis identify, wait for it, 5 worlds: early formal, standardized, authentic, democratic citizenship, systemic sustainability. So all of these education worlds exist at the same time, and they all have their paradigms slash metaphors slash image, aka clouds of ideas that people see the world through. And so if I'm living, get this, if I'm living in the world of early formal education, then I have a cloud of ideas and a frame that I see the world through that is going to be very different to somebody who lives in the systemic sustainability world. They'll be seeing a whole different world. They'll have different metaphors and they'll have different clouds of ideas which guide the actions of their community of practitioners. And so this is a problem. So I finished off, how's your education world? It's crucial because each of the worlds in the education multi-world operate in different webs. There's even webs of metaphors. It's likely that inhabitants of different worlds can't understand each other. But wait, it gets even more webby. Webs of association are meaning and compelling from the inside, right? But they can be confusing and nonsensical from the outside. Imagine that. So imagine if the bosses in your school are walking around in a particular world and you're walking around in a different one. Well, and they're from the outside then, and what you're doing appears confusing and nonsensical. And perhaps vice versa, except as a result of being a GBLer, you now have, and I'm sure you already did, have an understanding that there are worlds. And so you can understand, okay, the bosses, when the words they're using and the metaphors they're using and the clouds of ideas that guide their practice belong to a different world. Interesting. And then, clearly, if we know that we're working in different worlds, we can begin to learn the languages of each other and begin to talk to each other and begin to understand and hopefully be less confusing and nonsensical to each other. All right, I'm going to bring it home. So, as Guber explains, these clouds of ideas and assumptions guide our actions, and as Kelly pointed out, these actions have side effects, logical consequences, and a cascade of subsequent possibilities. So I've said here, surely we should strive to live in the world which is most nurturing for us and our students. Nobody should live in a world where their ideas are confusing and nonsensical. So I've foreshadowed the next idea. We're going to pack our clouds of ideas, and Davis has worked out this way to help us reveal people's worlds of residence. And so that is our project going forward. To have a look, we might go back here, and the idea is what are these worlds, and what are the metaphors? What is the discourse, which is another word for the language that people use? What are the clouds of ideas? What are the metaphors? What is the language? And what does that mean? Because, as I've just said, that those thoughts and flocks of ideas, the clouds of ideas, inform not just our actions, but the actions of a community of practitioners, aka music educators in New South Wales, for example. But they don't just guide. Get this. This is why it's even more important. They don't just guide, they constrain, right? If you're living in a particular world where there are particular ideas, then there's only certain things that are possible and other things are impossible until you move to a new world and all of a sudden, different possibilities. So, this, my gosh, I wish somebody would have come on YouTube every week and told me about this when I was a boy, just the other day, because this stuff is game-changing. Indeed, I'll even go so far to say that it's life-changing. OMG. Once it's like, I don't want to give too much away, but I'm going to reveal next week how this becomes a superpower, X-ray vision, for when people start to talk about education, about what is knowledge, what is learning, what is teaching, what is school for. As they start to use the words, you can have your X-ray vision ready, or maybe it's your X-ray ears. Whoa, hadn't thought of that. And start to go, I see what world you're coming from. And in the world you live in, I understand how that makes sense. But I live in a different world. So, and then we'll have 26 million podcasts to work out what we do about it. But next step, we're going to develop our superpowers of understanding how discourse can help us to understand the world that people inhabit. So there you go, the education multi-world. TM, pretty happy with that. So that was a longer and probably more meandering behind the scenes for How's Your World. But can you imagine? Circa 1991-92. Hello, Jeremy. Hello, Brad. How's your world? Well, I hope that's it. Wouldn't it be great if that's as impactful for you? Won't happen overnight, but it will happen as it was for me in 1991-92, and I'm still unpacking it. Holy smokes. Okay, cool. I have down here, I have a YouTube monitor, which would be massively helpful if it was actually monitoring YouTube. And then I just, you know that thing when you do an update and it breaks your computer? I just did an update and it broke my computer. And I have this monitor so I can see you. And when I move my cursor over here, it disappears. I just wanted you to know that it's not easy. So there you go. Anyway, so I want to have a look. Hey, Ben, good to see you. And Ben said those quotes on Clouds Flocks is awesome. Yeah, so good. I just think poor old I can never remember his name. The quotitioner. It's just a shame. I feel like he threw Kelly 2010. I feel like he threw away. He had two gems there, and he put them both in the same paragraph. I would have held on to one, but that's just me. Yeah, beautiful. So exciting. And meanwhile, hello, Jacob. Thanks for tuning in. And I'm so excited. Can I tell you, practitioners, that oh boy, I've been going around the community for, I don't know, maybe 8 years since I engaged with this Brent Davis school of thought, and just wandering around the earth going, when is everybody going to read this book so I can talk to somebody about it? So I'm just going to put the cart before the horse and talk to everybody about it, and just see if I can get some people on board so we can start talking about the education multi-world and see where we can get to from there. Yeah, pretty cool, pretty exciting. So I might just then sign off with something. I'd like to sign off. This might help us for next week. I'd like to sign off with a hot link and see if I can pull this off live. In the book, there's a website to go with the book. And in the book, well, it might be a bit much. Davis and Francis have put together this website, and it's all about every educational discourse and the flocks and clouds of ideas and stuff that, and it's their life's work. It's Davis's life's work, and I'm so excited to share it with you. I'm not sure if I've gathered the link yet. 4th edition, companion website. This is compelling viewing anyway, isn't it? Watching me surf the internet. I'll whack it in the community. Yes. Down the bottom you can see, if you're coming to us from YouTube and you don't know about the community of practice, turns out we have one. It's school.com/GBL COP, community of practice. So I'll do a little bit of preempting for next week. So next week we'll do some education multi-world work. We'll put on some glasses to get across this stuff, which I believe is going to blow your mind. I wish I had the blow your mind thing. I'll look into that for next week. And then the week after, don't forget, is Christmas party, and would love, because we're thinking about, that's enough. That'll be 5 episodes this week, this term. So we're thinking week 5, Christmas party, everybody come on, get your face on YouTube and stuff. And then we'll just like Pete and I used to say to our students last session on a Friday, let's just turn the engine off and glide into the weekend. So we'll do week 5, and we'll turn the engine off and glide into the weekend. And but this time the weekend's going to be the school holidays. That should be pretty cool. Okay, that is everything I have to talk about. So Pete has made, the other thing too, I'll put a link because Pete's done a teachers react, music teacher reacts to a reaction, I think, about some of the stuff going on with AI. So I'll put a link to that in school as well, and we can chat about that. So thanks for tuning in. Thanks for coming along, and thanks, Ben, for having your comment up on the screen for so long. It's all part of being on YouTube, isn't it? Okay, on behalf of everybody, I think if I can find an outro, we'll go to the outro, and then I'll pop the Zoom on if anybody wants to come to the Zoom and have a chat about life and the universe and the education multi-world. I'll be there for a little while. Till next week, or till the Zoom, this has been the weekly... Well, better put that up. No, will we? Yes. This has been the Weekly Jam. See you, if I can find the right outro. See you next